Check, check, 1, 2.
Thank you, Miguel.
Good morning. Today is Thursday, March 30th, 2023. Commissioners Court is meeting in special open session. Would you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Judge, would you like to make any opening comments before?
Yeah, just thank you for being here. This is the small version of Commissioners Court, but it's a little cozy, so it feels good as well. So thank you for being here. Thursdays, I always enjoy Thursdays, and this is before I start, on behalf of the commissioners and myself to welcome you. But this is, we used to meet here quite a bit, and but I was saying that Thursdays is still special because we get a little bit more of an opportunity to talk about topics and really try to understand them. So thank you for being here today, and we wish you a great weekend at this point. Thank you.
Item number 3 is public comment. We do not have any speakers signed up for a public comment. We'll take no action for item 3. Item number 4, regular agenda. Receive a presentation from County Administration, Criminal Justice Coordination, and the Juvenile Justice Chief regarding pending justice system matters, to include the re-entry concept, the Sobering Center, the CJC Annual Report, crime trends, and other justice system updates. Provide staff with feedback on pending justice projects.
Good morning, Judge, Commissioners. Joel Bishop with County Administration. This morning I'm joined with Chief Medina and Chief Marquez from Juvenile Probation, and Ms. Catherine Jones from the CJC. We are going to provide you with some updates this morning, a variety of updates. Some of them are related, some not so much, but they're all together under the justice reform concept for the court. So I think these are very important updates that will hopefully help pressing forward with our justice reform agenda. The 3 key things we want to go over this morning are the reentry ARPA funds that you assigned. We want to talk about the CJC annual report, just a brief overview, and the UTEP study, and the crime trends and bookings on 17-year-olds that were discussed in strategic planning. We have some data on that we wanted to share with you. The first concept is the reentry ARPA funds. The court allocated $10 million to this project for ARPA, and we've looked into it carefully. We've done extensive analysis of this. The sheriff even donated a potential lot for this project out by the East Annex. And so we evaluated that. We've looked at the cost and designs. And really what we found is, due to the inflation and the scope of the project, it was very, very difficult to try to get it down to that 10 million marker to do a county run project. We can do it, but it's going to really limit the scope of the project that we had initially planned. So in the process of working with our architects and design, we were also looking at the potential for nonprofit infrastructure to enhance their infrastructure to accomplish the same thing, maybe through a variety of agencies. So we found that there is an already existing detox that's interested in working with us through Homeward Bound. So there's a potential there. What we don't have is a sobering center, and that was part of this concept. And law enforcement has requested this consistently. They want a safe place to drop off people with addictions issues or who are intoxicated, rather than emergency rooms, homeless shelters, and the jail. That's really their option right now. So what we would like to do is continue to press forward with that and see if there are nonprofits who could provide some beds for this, some mats on the floor for this. And I think we do have options for that. So we'd like to issue an RFQ and see what kind of responses we get. We met with San Antonio and Houston, their programs that do this. We have a pretty good idea of what this will take and what best practices are. So we would like the court to just, we're looking for direction from you to make sure it's okay to issue an RFQ to see if we could accomplish this same goal, utilizing and enhancing existing nonprofit infrastructure rather than building a county facility that is going to be expensive and may be hard to budget for operationally in the long term. That's the other issue, is it's going to be expensive to budget for in the long term. and it may require funding from the general fund. And with this, we may be able to get out to help our nonprofits and help prepare them to deal with this, not only homelessness, but the county's reentry program. And also things when we get a migrant surge, it could help with that, expand the infrastructure for that as well. So I just wanted to bring this back to the court, and not necessarily looking for action today at all, but just wanted to make sure you're okay with this direction. Okay.
Really quick before you move on from that, Joel, I also want to commend Joel on that, because this is also a message we've heard from you all. Under our goal 5 of collaboration, one of the things I've repeatedly heard you all say is like, don't do what's already being done by nonprofits. Look for, like, make sure we're not duplicating, and look for where we can use partners instead of something that we may not have done or may not be experts in yet, using those who already are. And so a huge thanks to Joel in, not going into this with like, I have to look to build a reentry facility. He really explored throughout he's being very summarizing and concise today, but he's really explored a lot of options on different ways of doing this. And it's a great partnership work on his behalf. So
we're very grateful because, we have to depend not only on our budget, we depend on grants, we depend on partnerships. And I think the county has done just an amazing job. If you look at how much money we get from property taxes and how much we do, it's it's pretty impressive. And this does that. And also everything that we could do to avoid someone getting into the jail process, that gets into the criminal system. And I know that our commissioner here understands this probably more than we all do, but just keeping someone from going in that direction. And we know that once they get in that system, things don't go as well as trying to avoid. So I think we touch on so many excellent points in this program. So Joel, thank you, and everyone else that got involved in this.
Thank you, Judge. And I want to commend our reentry team, who has done a tremendous amount of work in the community already. Right now we've developed a partnership with the Rescue Mission, who are already housing 15 beds, reentry beds for the county. B. Fierro worked out a partnership with Punto de Partida, who's housing dozens of county reentry clients already. So that's part of where we started to begin to realize nonprofits may be the solution rather than building our own facility. So our reentry program's done really good. I think you were able to meet with B yesterday, Commissioner.
Yes.
Coronado, and it'll tie into the El Paso Promise stuff. Hopefully we can help with that program as well.
Yeah, I think it will. And I think we found out, Catherine's here, that we need to maybe start, getting some more information from those people that are on probation with regard to their education level. And that hasn't really been kept, but I think we're going to start to do that, so that'll help us with those issues. I think Catherine told us that initially there's like about 90% of people don't really have either any kind of post-high school workforce training, or some of them have some community college hours, but as I figured, that's probably was going to be the case. And so there's about an opportunity there to be able to
totally aligned with your program.
Yes, exactly. We'll align with our program.
So we're excited about that project too, but thank you for that direction. We will explore that and keep you posted as we press forward. The next exciting update, I think, is the CJC's annual report. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Staff.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to chime in really quickly. Sorry, y'all, for hopping on a little bit late, but the last bullet point on the last slide that talks about using the opioid funding for a sobering center. I just wanted to have a conversation with the court. I know that Cito has talked to Joel a little bit about this. We had a meeting recently with the Harm Reduction Coalition folks, and they were talking to us about the importance of possibly using some of that funding to provide access to Narcan in the public. And so I wanted to ask you, Joel, and talk to the court about what they may think about that. I think that if you talk to them, they're the folks that are also kind of out on the street, out on the ground, talking to folks that are dealing with opioid addiction, and some of those folks that would actually be taken to, if that may be taken to a sobering center, and they seem to think that it might be a better use of that opioid funding to provide more access to Narcan for the public. So I just wanted to let y'all know about that, and ask Joel to make sure that we talk to them and we include them in some of the projects that we're working on. I think they have a very important and or an important perspective that we should take into account.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks to your office for setting up those meetings with the group that's working on this. We're meeting with them in the near future. I have looked at some of the research too on Narcan, and when it's administered in communities, it can help reduce some of the opioid overdose deaths. So we are definitely planning on evaluating that as well. And I certainly think that whole program and opportunity will be a part of this whole sobering center concept. So for sure, I definitely think it would be very appropriate for some of the opioid funding for us to consider allocating it to that.
Just for our education, are there any limitations to that opioid funding? Has to be very direct, or could it be used in more of a general sense?
I think there are limitations, but as long as it's focused on addiction issues and things like Narcan solutions and sobering center type stuff, I think is right in line with what they're thinking. I do think I think it can address any sort of substance abuse addiction, but we will keep some of it may depend on the source where it's coming from. It's going to come from different sources and different grants that have limitations, but we will keep evaluating that. And as we get more specific solutions, we'll make sure that legal has taken a good look at that for us before we present it.
Thank you.
And I think just today it was announced, or yesterday it was announced, that Narcan will now be available over the counter.
Yeah. And I saw
They've been
Joanne.
working on it.
Yep. Good morning,
Thank you.
Judge and Commissioners. I just wanted to chime in on the limitations on the use of the opioid funds. There's actually two different types of pots of money. One was a settlement that the Commissioners Court that the county received, and it has much fewer limitations. The second pot of money is money that the county can apply for from the larger fund, and that does have far more restrictions on being related to treatment and intervention related to opioid and other health considerations. So, Joel, I don't know which, or Commissioner, I don't know which pot of money you're referring to specifically, but there is one that has very few limitations.
Thank you, Joanne.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good, great insight.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. All right, pressing forward to the CJC's annual report. I just wanted to give Ms. Catherine Jones the opportunity to give you a brief overview. I know you've received that separately, but a brief overview of the highlights from the CJC's annual report. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Catherine Jones.
Thank you, Joel. Catherine Jones, Criminal Justice Director of the Criminal Justice Coordination Department. Thank you so much for letting me be here this morning. I am very proud to announce we have published our 2022 annual report. I want to thank Joel. He told me to press forward with a new design and a new vision for it, and that is what we have done. There are a few highlights that we will be showing you. One of the main roles that we have is our assessment and intake unit, downtown detention facility. We have 25 staff assigned to this unit. They work 24/7. Last fiscal year, they completed over 12,000 pretrial reports and research assessments, over 15,000 indigent assessments. 71% of these were eligible for indigent defense. Okay, so if you look at page 10 of the annual report, you will see a 5-year comparison. And I wanted to spotlight this for you to show you that we are seeing an increase in those who are eligible for court-appointed attorneys, which does have a fiscal impact on the county. For our public safety reports, since April of last year, we have completed over 15,000 of these public safety reports as a result of SB6. Our supervision unit, we have 22 staff assigned to this unit. I'm proud to announce our compliance rates for this past fiscal year. 82% of our defendants completed their supervision with no rearrest. 77% had a full conditions compliance rate, and 92% had perfect court appearance rates. Okay, those are very good. Okay, we are very proud of that. And a few of the impacts we have and a few of our upcoming projects. The preliminary research assessment by UTEP revalidating our pretrial research assessment shows there are no racial or gender disparities. Okay, it's very, very good. Another thing I want to spotlight is if you look on page 8 of our annual report, what you're going to see is a 3-year comparison of known research levels to individuals who remain in jail. At the strategic planning retreat, one of the things you discussed was keeping those individuals who are risk to public safety or a risk for flight in jail, as opposed to those individuals who pose no real flight risk or danger. And if you look at page 8, you will see that is exactly what we are doing. Okay, our research assessment is doing precisely what it should be doing. Those individuals who are at a higher level are the ones who are being detained. We are in the process of working with the judiciary to hopefully complete a violation guide that will give my officers more of a black and white paper on what the judges want them to submit moving forward. We are in the process of developing our enterprise supervision software, which I think, as I told Commissioner Coronado, will be very beneficial to us in keeping robust data and being able to run the reports that we need to run. We are starting our pretrial supervision guidelines update, also known as Smart Praxis. And we have assembled a team from the public defenders, the DA, the courts, and we are all getting together to look at that and update that. We have been working with the courts, Judge Morales, to work on a potential walk-in warrant court, which should help alleviate some of the warrants that we have. And next fiscal year, we are looking at moving forward with accreditation from the National Association of Pretrial Service Agencies. This year, we are getting all of our staff certified with NAPSA. And that will be the first step in moving forward with our accreditation next year.
Just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I take it we've never been accredited?
No, sir.
And just another side question, I think to coincide with Commissioner Coronado's drive. Of the 92% that do show up for court and do everything that's asked of them, how many of those are employed?
That is a question I cannot answer, sir. Let me see if we have data on that. I will get back to you on that.
But don't waste too much time on it. I was just curious to see.
No, that's a very good question, and something that I think that we should be looking at. My supervision manager is right here, so I know that he's going to go back and tell his staff to start ensuring that we are maintaining good statistics on unemployment.
And there's a wider reason for that as well, because we don't identify. We need more workforce in El Paso tremendously, and we're not understanding. There's more people out there that might not be employed, but what are the barriers to be employed? Because we're getting more and more companies, and they love the fact that we have personnel and great workforce and great ethics, but we might, and Betsy and I've talked about it. It's going to be a point where we're asking companies to come in, but we can't provide a workforce for them. And so we're looking at every possibility to get our workforce prepared for some of the companies that are wanting to come in. So there's probably clusters out there. I'll give you an example. They were saying, oh, they just don't want to come into work. And we found out childcare was this huge, huge barrier. And there was this stereotype or the stigma that, you know, they just didn't want to come because they had incentives and they were still using the money, which sounded ridiculous. But then we found out the barriers of childcare were so huge. And there was a huge shift in the moms and dads and uncles that used to take care of the children, but because of the pandemic, they either unfortunately died or they became scared of being in any environment. And so we found out there's a cluster there that we can bring in. And now we're finding other. And I think, you know, Commissioner Coronado's focus is if they're unemployed, we have problems.
Right.
I mean, from mental health and not feeling good about themselves to not being able to secure things and maybe having to find alternatives to getting income, you know, I'm putting it lightly, but you know, that it's got a lot of touching points. So I think that's a great question to see. And then if we could connect that with economic development to say, we're finding a lot of individuals that are not unemployed. And these are the barriers to the fact that they're not unemployed. And I'm sure Leila Melendez will jump on that because Workforce Solutions is really trying their best to get people out to work.
Sir, excellent.
It's also an opportunity for us to consider legislation. I know when I was in HR, I proposed this a long time ago because it gives employers a protection as well. But so we've had applicants or employees who had some kind of criminal record, and there is no, in the human resources world, there's no like set rule in Texas, like how long before people that's forgiven, if you will. In New Mexico, they have a law called the Criminal Offenders Rehabilitation Act, and it says that after, depending on the type of crime that they were charged with, but after so long, it should no longer be considered for employment purposes. Now, obviously, there's still some like exceptions, or like, for example, if it was a child molestation, you don't have to consider them for a job working with children, but you'd be able to consider them for a different type of job. Or if so many years have passed since their last, they completed their whatever their sentence was, then that's no longer held against the employer. If you hire them, you're no longer liable if something were to happen, as long as you did your diligence. But that law not only helps us reemploy those who do have a criminal past, or a criminal record, but it also protects the employer and gives them some cover to be able to not feel afraid because of liability. And it is a big deal. That reemployment issue is such a big deal for those who are coming out of the justice system.
What we've seen is if most employers will not hire someone with a criminal record right off the bat because they just have this trust. But we've seen that when they're part of a program, that employers are more likely to want to accept them because now you've got somebody that's there, like you said, they're taking a little bit of accountability, but also it's an organization presenting this person and vetting them out a little bit. And so they feel much more comfortable. So I think it'd be great to understand that, you know, what can we do to, and you're right, people could be 10 years if they've done something minor and they're still seen as not, you know, eligible for employment, which is disheartening, but that's the case.
All excellent points, and you're absolutely right. Many studies show that one of the biggest causes for recidivation is unemployment. Individuals are unable to be hired, and so they fall back in to the life of crime. Anecdotally, one of the best hires I ever made in a past life was a former inmate who was phenomenal and really, really happy to have been able to work with him.
Good discussion.
Thank you, and I will look into those statistics for you, sir, and if we're not doing it, we're gonna start doing it.
Yeah, it's curious, and I'm sure all of you have seen it. I was at a corner one day waiting for the light to change, and every one of the corners had a business that had not hiring, yet there was somebody that was begging that looked healthier than me. Well, everybody looks healthier than me, but And it gets you to wonder, what is the barrier of that person getting any kind of job?
It's reflecting.
And on our pretrial, on our research assessment, it is one of the risk factors for pretrial misconduct is employment related. UTEP is researching that as one of the factors, and they should have research specifically on that one item. How does that item correlate to pretrial misconduct? If Jacob, Miles, and Jose Devora already found it was one of the big six. As Kathy mentioned, it's a criminogenic risk factor, well researched and known to be related to rearrest. So a very good question, and we hopefully will get some answers from UTEP as well in the near future.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Kathy.
Presentation.
Right. Okay, so one of the things that was mentioned as a potential issue coming up in strategic planning, and it's certainly pending right now in Texas legislation, is this HB 491. I think others kind of a raise the age idea of on the juveniles from 16 to 17. Right now, the 17-year-olds go into our jail. We have a lot of data on that over the years. As you see on the board here, what you're seeing is since 2012, the number of bookings, 17-year-olds into our jail. And you can see it steadily declined because in the gray, on the gray bar, those are misdemeanors. Felonies have not declined. So it's perhaps just, don't know exactly why, but practices may have changed. Enforcement may have changed. A lot less misdemeanor arrests, so less 17-year-olds coming into the jail. But in the felonies area, that has not decreased. It may have increased a little bit in the last few years, but it definitely in the last few months, we've seen an increase that could be troubling. So we asked the chief, we provided this to Chief Medina, and the idea would be is what would the impact be on JPD and the jail if that age is raised, or if if from 16 to 17 for juveniles. This isn't as big of a deal for the jail. For the jail, what we would see is about, it's about 11 to 14 beds a day are 17-year-olds. That's not as big of a deal for the jail, but for the JPD, it's a big deal. We're talking a multi-million-dollar per year impact, infrastructure needs, which they'll talk about more. The other thing for the jail is if this was pushed, if the number of beds from 17-year-olds was pushed to JPD, that would likely be replaced with federal beds. That's typically how you see that trend go. Less federal beds go out to private prisons, more stay here, and that could have about a $400,000 a year impact in revenue, positive impact in revenue, if we replace those 17-year-olds with federal beds. So the county could see more federal revenue if that happened, but it would be a much greater impact to JPD than what we would see. So, so with that, I want to turn it over to Chief Medina and Chief Marquez to talk about the potential impacts. They've done a lot of analysis on that. I want to thank them for coming.
Appreciate that, John. Apologize, we were already there. Okay. Just so I know, Commissioner Smith, thank you so much for having us here. Obviously, opportunity to present to you. For the record, Mark Marcus, Deputy Chief of Operations for the Paso County Juvenile Justice Center. And before I get started, I want to congratulate Commissioner Coronado for being elected to Commissioner's Court. And Chief Medina and I and the rest of the JPD team look forward to hosting you sometime in the near future. So let's go ahead and get started. I do want to say, I think it's something to be proud of as a community. We're the only jurisdiction in Texas that has gone through raise the age analysis through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. This began in 2017. And the reason I mention that to you, it's absolutely important for us, for Commissioners Court and the community to know that we haven't been sitting back and waiting for legislation to be enacted. We've been crying wolf for several legislative sessions now, but we've been diligent. We've been making ourselves ready. I'm only going to go over some key points of the study. It is an 83-page document. It's available to you on our website, but I'm going to jump right into it. So essentially the time frame that the American Institute for Research was looking at was 2012 to 2015. So as you can see, quite a bit has changed since then, and Mr. Bishop outlined that for you. There has been a significant decrease, or at least a decrease in the referrals of 17-year-olds. For us, that translates into 16-year-olds. Let me tell you what that means. Part of the methodology that was used is actually developed by Dr. Deach out of UT Austin. And what Dr. Deach and her team is saying, and we look at the current number of 16-year-olds that are in the system now, juvenile justice system now, that should more or less mirror what we should anticipate when raise the age were to be enacted, increasing the age of jurisdiction in Texas. So that's essentially the methodology that was used. Now, there was also a marginal cost projection that was conducted. Nothing that's of a significant interest to all of us, because essentially that puts a dollar sign on a projected dollar sign on what this may mean to the county and JPD. And again, I'll let Chief Maria speak to some of the more legislative issues involved with that, which is unfunded mandates. But in reference to the marginal costs, very quickly, so what the team did, the research team did, is they looked at what is the impact at the intake portion of the justice system. At the point of referral, there's a cost incurred there, and they replicated that through the entire system, that we would have an understanding comprehensively from an operational perspective. What is the overall cost of operation? So the projected population growth, and I apologize, it's not specifically listed here. For that 4-year average of 780, we should anticipate an additional 780 referrals, 17 years. However, that's a very conservative estimate, and it was based on those projections. Those are not expected to be as high. And out of those 780, we're looking at approximately 240 felony referrals, which we would anticipate being detained. Now, there's quite a few activities that were put in place, I'll speak to in a little bit, to help minimize that impact. So essentially, the projected cost at the time of this analysis was $7,128,811. However, that does not account for any capital improvements. And we've had discussions, whether it be through Commissioner's Court or through budget, for JPD be able to project out that, you know what, we have not expanded our facility in over 30 years. And we're not, even without raising age, we're not really meeting the needs of the community at this point. So this does not, again, account for any expansion, development of additional housing units at the facility. So again, and I don't have to tell you, that projected cost was based on the cost of materials and staffing ratios and salaries back when this analysis was conducted. So that's what we're looking at. Now, something that's important and then that mirrors what Mr. Bishop had presented to you is the efforts that we've made for the last 7 years to build capacity. In other words, if we are to receive an additional 700 youth into our system, 7-year-olds, how are we going to accommodate that number? So what we've done, and what the research will tell you, is that throwing money at the problem is not the solution. And that has been proposed. Many jurisdictions in Texas want to build state-of-the-art detention center ranging from anywhere to $50 to $75 million. We're not taking that approach, and I'll let Chief Benita speak a little bit more to that. What we've done essentially, through Raise the Age and also through a probation system review through the Robert F. Kennedy National Resource Center, is look at how we're currently operating. Where do we have current inefficiencies? And if we can make the operation efficient, then we will build capacity to accommodate more youth. And one of the key elements there is enhancing diversion. We're currently diverting about 33% of our population, and if we continue that and possibly enhance that, we'll definitely be able to accommodate more youth coming into the system. Because of course, utilizing what's referred to as a Pareto principle, we want to focus on the 20% of our population that's going to consume about 80% of our resources. So that's essentially is the approach. I do want to take a very quick opportunity to thank County Attorney Ms. Bernal, her team, Laura Christopherson, and Assistant County Attorney Emily Dawson. They've done a phenomenal job of working with us and really creating processes, efficient processes to divert a lot of these cases. It's no mystery. We have an issue with the THC vaping cases, felony vaping cases here in El Paso, a high volume. But our county attorney team, our JPD team, public defenders, and the community has really come together to assist and develop programming to divert these cases. And that's the approach we need to take. Mr. Bishop had mentioned community collaboration. Without a doubt, that's the key. You know, our school systems are our key stakeholders. They're at the table. We're going to continue to have these conversations. So as you can see, we've made efforts, and even currently, we received technical assistance from Georgetown University, the Annie Casey Foundation, to continue a transforming juvenile justice initiative. So we're continuing our efforts to make our system as efficient as possible, not only just to have a juvenile justice system we can be proud of in El Paso, but again, to build capacity. If we are going to receive an inordinate amount of referrals as a result of the Raise Age legislation, we want to be able to accommodate that. And I'm be perfectly honest, with you, we're not going to do it without some funding, but we want to make sure that we're demonstrating our due diligence and creating capacity.
Can I ask
Yes, sir.
a huge favor? I need to step up, but I don't want to miss this. And I need like just 10 minutes. It would be, you'd be so kind as to,
Absolutely, sir.
yeah, I hate to miss this, and I need to go into the probate court for 10 minutes, and I'll be right back.
Yes, sir.
So,
Absolutely.
okay, we take a
Actually,
10-minute.
Commissioners Court will recess for 10 minutes. Commissioners Court has reconvened to special open session. We are still on item number 4.
All right, thank you all so much for your time. Again, Mark Marcus, Deputy Chief for the El Paso County Juvenile Justice Center. So the next bullet point, and again, just to reiterate, we do have 3 initiatives underway with assistance from Georgetown University and the Annie Casey Foundation. However, one of the key initiatives that we have in place, a strategy, if you would, to minimize the number of youth in detention and get building capacity, is our predisposition supervision program. So as much as possible, we use a system of structured decision-making with validated assessment tools to determine which youth can be removed from our detention facility and placed on a predisposition supervision program. So we continue to make efforts again to maximize capacity and on the probation side, the ones kids are have gone to the disposition or placed on formal probation, we continuously assess to determine which ones, which youth qualify for a minimal amount of time on probation. So it's a systemic approach to identify youth from the beginning of the system to the back end of the system, continuously assess and identify how we can reintegrate and hopefully reach a successful termination of probation. Now, I do also want to say something that mirrors what Mr. Bishop had mentioned. We have had an ongoing relationship with the University of Texas in El Paso since 2007. We currently have 2 research projects underway. One is the decision-making at the front end, but special interest on our part in the indigent population and how and whether decisions are made differently for indigent youth as opposed to other youth. And that's equal importance to raise the age because we anticipate we're going to continue having indigent youth enter the system. So we want to make sure that we're making efficient and effective decisions at the front end. One other study is actually at the back end of the system, which is reintegration. What is it that we need to do to more effectively reintegrate our youth who've been put into placements or residential treatment facilities and reintegrate them back into the community? Once again, something that does mirror what's happening with Mr. Bishop and his team is we've partnered with the Workforce Solutions because we have identified that one of the key formulas of success, if you would, is education and vocation. And we can get these kids, whether it be a diploma, GED, and some vocational skills. That has actually worked out very well for us. And that's a strategy we want to continue to pursue. Going back to our initial efforts, 2016, 2017, I want to give our director of the Challenge Academy, Director Mike Tillman, some credit. He actually worked for the state when it was known as the Texas Youth Commission. He worked at state facilities. So we're very fortunate and have the benefit of having an administrator who's been where we're going. He's worked with a population when they used to stay with the state till they were 21. It's 19 now. So he's one that really brought these strategies. He knows what he's seen what's worked. So that type of insight has been invaluable. And one last point. When we look at building capacity, one area that we're still weak in and we do have a deficit in is in our staffing levels. Even aside from raise the age, we are still 7 juvenile supervision officers short in our detention facility. And that's based on the National Institute of Corrections shift relief factor formula. So that's really important to note because even though the state funds us, we have to take that into consideration or funds this initiative, that we are still 7 staff under the recommended staffing levels. So that's the last point that I have for you on just a raise the age update and some of the efforts that we've made. We're happy to answer any questions before I turn it over to Chief Judge.
Mark, great presentation. And during the break, I spoke to Betsy about, we brought that up during strategic planning because I don't know if in this session you all may know some newer information insofar as the 17-year-old being bumped up to adults or bumped down to juveniles. And I was going to ask about the staffing that's going to impact you all, but really the budget is going to be a huge impact. And just to let you know that we spoke about it during strategic planning, that, but I don't have a sense of, do you think it's going to happen this session or maybe in a couple of sessions?
So what I'm hearing from chiefs across the state, there's a legislative committee work group that we have. It's called One Voice that I participate in. What we're hearing is that Senator Whitmire, who has been behind the Raise the Age initiative for the past 3 legislative sessions, is really pushing hard. This is his last legislative session, and he wants to finalize it and wrap it up. There's several bills that are proposing to raise the age. The chiefs, the sense that they're getting is that the focus is really on TJJD and stabilizing that state agency, probably more so than to raise the age, but there's always that possibility, right, that it may just pass this year. As chiefs, we support raise the age. Just developmentally, those 17-year-olds do belong in the juvenile justice system. But the biggest concern is the fiscal impact that it's going to have on the counties. We are hopeful that even if it does pass, and in what we've proposed, and there's been edits to bills, is that the state fund the feasibility study across the state, right, to determine what the fiscal impacts are going to be, from infrastructure to being able to staff, and then all of the support staff that also are going to be required for facilities such as ours that are going to require expansion. So if it does pass, hopefully it'll be 2 years or 4 years down the line before it actually is enacted to allow for that study and for counties, right, and the state to plan accordingly. But we're really crossing our fingers that it's not going to be a completely unfunded mandate, because it's going to put a significant strain on counties that have facilities, because not all counties do. And here in El Paso, we are the largest department in the West Texas region, and we have about 13 contracts for our pre and our post to support those smaller counties that do not have facilities. As of late, we are not accepting children into our pre-adjudication, which would be our detention facility, because we have been operating close to capacity, and currently we are exceeding capacity. But we do accept kids into our posts because we do have space availability.
Betsy, is there any way that we could find out if there's some kind of an offset? Because you're taking them from another facility, which won't have them. Is there an offset that would help us?
So if what I believe the two offsets, or what the offset would be, is you'd have a reduction in jail population. So your jail population, can you go back to the screen, Alexis, that shows the numbers? And the other thing too, I'd mentioned, and I know probably Jacob has the data where we could drill down into it, but when you look at that bed days and the 287 bookings, so it was 3,008, I'm looking at year 2022. If you look at the 3,864 bed days, that was done by 287 detainees. So we had, do you see the number above, 287? That's 173 felonies and 114 misdemeanors for age 17. The situation for that with the jail, I would say we would need to do some more analysis, but you'll have 287 less detainees in your jail, and those would be moved to your JPD. The offset, the problem with an offset, 287 detainees in the big picture is not very much. So, and you have a 1-to-48 ratio, and we have relief factors. You're not going to see a significant decrease in jail costs. And the thing is they're not, I would venture to say they're not spread out. Like, you don't get one a day, right? You probably get 4 one day, because it's probably some group incident, especially with youth. And then maybe a few days with no 17-year-old bookings, and then 2 to next. So it's not something that you can evenly just say, we're going to reduce the sheriff's office by 2 detention officers.
It's the economy of scale, because you might go up and down, but it's not going to impact the fixed costs that go into
But where there might be some reduction, I don't know if the state, I don't know, I'd have to look to see what costs the state would be reimbursing or helping to provide for JPD if we raised the age and there were more JPD participants, if there was any funding there.
And
Joel,
the other thing, Betsy, is that what the pattern we've seen is that the only revenue we would get if we stopped seeing those as potentially replacing, if they replaced it with federal beds?
The reason why I'm real hesitant when just to rely on that, our federal numbers have been really low this year. Our federal numbers are trending
true.
low,
It
we're
doesn't-
way under budget revenue for
Right.
feds this year. So I'm hesitant to rely on federal to offset.
Good point. But
Well,
that'd be
not
the
only
only
that,
potential.
but the cost to house a juvenile is way more expensive.
At least
than,
3 times.
3 times or 4 times as much. And so
That makes sense.
even with that, it's going to be. Can you tell us what the increase in the felonies, what type, the ones that are detained longer on juveniles, what type of felonies we're talking about?
So we've run some data recently, obviously, we've seen in media reports, right, more juveniles engaged in violent crime. And what we're seeing based on our data is that violent crime, when we go all the way back to 2019 to current, our violent crime has remained at about 36% of all arrests coming into our department are for violent offenses. What we're seeing, though, is an increase of 24% in offenses involving weapons, right? So the public safety concern is great. And those youth tend to remain detained for longer periods of time and at times until they're disposed of. And whether we're going to be committing them to TJJD or placing them in a residential facility, or if we're even going to explore community-based supervision. Unlike our adult system that has the ability to bond out, the juvenile justice system does not have that. So the courts utilize their discretion to determine whether a child is going to remain detained or be released. So we are definitely seeing an increase in the amount of felony offenders housed. Whereas in previous years, I would say, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, we would have more misdemeanor offenders detained. We would have more kids held on probation violations detained. That population has shifted. And the vast majority of kids in our facility at this time are there for felony level offenses, or their probation violations have been egregious of sorts where we are looking at a commitment or a removal from the community.
What was, how far back does it go on the going to 17? Like when did when one time was 16?
I think it's,
The age?
I think it's always been.
Yes, sir. You're asking as far as age of jurisdiction?
Yeah.
It's, for us, it's 10 to 16 as far as the referrals. So if the youth commits an offense at 16, they're brought to
But
us.
how long has it been up to age 16?
You know what, I've been in the system 25 years and I can only speak to those 25 years. And I would imagine, Judge, maybe even when
That's what I was thinking,
Yes, ma'am.
because one of the things that I'm sure it's different now, but when I was a probation officer, we also had to almost isolate the 17-year-olds because, it's difficult. You don't want the 17 over here because then they're vulnerable. But then when you put the 17 over here, makes the other kids vulnerable because you're going to have 13 and 14 with a 17-year-old.
Yes, sir.
And so I remember
You're
just to think about the idea that for some reason I remember having to do all kinds of things to seclude them a little bit from the rest of the population. And there was a lot of things that we did to keep them. But I'm not sure if I'm
You're
correct at that. But
You're absolutely correct, yes, sir. That's more of an operational decision because of the risk. And you're absolutely correct. You don't want, you can have we do have an 18-year-old with us now, but you don't want that type of youth with higher risk levels to associate with, let's say, a 13.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So that's more of an operational decision to try.
so it's a consideration on the cost factor as well.
The other thing, Judge, that's really interesting about this data right here, we were talking about it a little bit at the break. I would love to see the studies because during the pandemic, we heard about how virtual school was having negative impacts on youth. There might have also been some positive impacts because you look, 2021, school was virtual. Parents were more likely working from home. Our numbers in 2021 were 55% lower than 2019. And so, that might be one of the other sides of the coin of the pandemic. I don't know, obviously we'd have to do a lot more research, but you know that that's what was going on in 2021. Kids were going to school virtually, some more often people were working from home.
If I could add, I'm sorry, just very quickly, from a more of a sociological standpoint, when you look at the school system is first and foremost a social system. The social system just happens to provide education. And what you'll see in our stats, as soon as the reconstitution began for schools, it was concomitant to an increase in our referrals. The schools constitute, I believe, we're at about 35% of overall referrals. They are the highest referral source that we have. So as soon as the kids were back into the physical school setting, our referrals began to increase as it was prior to that.
Right, and to the point that Ms. Keller made, in 2021, we had 941 referrals to our system. Jump into 2022, we had 2,117. Through the end of Q1, December 31st, we were already at 559 referrals. So on the trajectory, looking at 2023, we're going to exceed last year's numbers. And weapon offenses are definitely on an uphill slope.
When we had that meeting at the East Side, that was one of the big items that now something that would have been maybe a misdemeanor, but you have a gun involved, and now you've got a totally different situation because of that. So yeah,
So, definitely, we as a department have been doing and will continue to do the good work of finding strategies to try and keep kids as shallow as possible in our system. Prevention is key. Prevention is important. I've said that multiple times. That is not our primary charge as a department, but we are definitely investing. Our intake unit under the direction of Director Garcia is doing a phenomenal job working with the school districts, currently with Isleta Independent School District on the implementation of restorative circles. They're targeting 100 elementary school children, which are not even in our age group, but we feel very strongly that if we are able to share these skill sets and encourage our school systems to operate or run restorative circles to handle, the bickering that happens between students or fights that happen between students, hopefully we're going to be able to prevent these children from coming into our juvenile justice system. We run restorative circles with our JJAPs to help them reintegrate right back into their academic campuses that expelled them by bringing in school administrators. So we're definitely investing and hoping to bring down those numbers, but it is very evident that if Raise the Age does pass, we do not have the capacity. We don't have the building space to house kids that are going to be detained. There is definitely going to be a need to build minimum of 2 pods. Ideally, I think if we're looking at future growth, and I'm not a planner, but I'm venturing to say that we probably need 4. As Deputy Marquez, and he has the historical knowledge, but the way our building is built currently, we're unable to build up. So if we have space, is what I've been told, we have space to potentially build a 12-unit pod and an 8-unit pod. Ideally, if it's new construction, hopefully that construction can go up to be able to accommodate for future needs that our community may have. Our facility is rather small compared to other jurisdictions that are smaller than us and have more capacity. And we've managed for 30 years, but we're at a point now where growth is necessary. In the presentation that Deputy Marquez shared, we are currently short 7 JSOs just in our detention facility. And we are striving to be in compliance with PREA, which is ideally where we should be. And in order to get there, we still need to fill those 7 vacancies. And that does not account for any future growth if we add beds.
well, what a strong argument. We already have a tremendous incline without this other factor. So even without the age situation, we're already in a capacity kind of place. So
And we have a hiring crisis. It's not unique to El Paso. The entire state is struggling to hire correctional officers or detention officers. We average 16 interviews, and out of the 16, we may be able to find 4 qualified applicants, because of course, it's not that we're being picky, but we definitely have to find the right person to work with our youth, right? So we have open recruitments, and we currently have 13 openings in our detention facility and 7 in our post-residential facility. And we're struggling to fill them, which is just kind of compounds the struggles that we're having in the juvenile justice field when it comes to our detention facilities.
And Chief, if I may, what do you think is the main cause of the shortage of applicants? I know it's true of a police department. I know it's true of
Teachers.
EMS, teachers. What do you think is the main?
I wish I could say it's salaries, but we pay well. Our starting supervision officer with a high school diploma, we're starting at $41,000. They're good paying jobs. I don't know, and my own personal opinion, I feel that corrections was a career. People went in because they saw it as a career. Now corrections is a stepping stone. I see when I interview candidates, a lot of them are coming to us with degrees, and this is their entry into the juvenile justice or into the criminal justice field. So it's a stepping stone for professional development if they're not making it a career. And as a matter of fact, yesterday I was at a summit that was hosted by one of our local ministries, Trinity Methodist Church, and I met with a UTEP professor that teaches juvenile justice, and we were talking about the curriculum that's provided, and how much are they enforcing or educating our college students on corrections, and it being a noble field and a field of interest for others. And they touch on the subject, but it's not something that they're investing as much time in as when I was in college back in the 90s. That was my area of most interest, was corrections, and we had multiple courses available to us as students in the corrections field.
I think it's something we really need to understand, and I know the pandemic had a lot of, people's way of thinking shifted tremendously, and it's almost, there's so much uncertainty out there that people are looking more for jobs than careers than ever before. And that's really, for example, the military, their recruitment is down tremendously. And we're hoping that by having the Veterans Capital, that we would honor veterans to make them feel better about being a veteran one day. So we're trying our best, because like law enforcement has taken a big hit, anything law enforcement. And so people are sort of saying, well, I'll take a job and let's see what happens later, and then I'll figure out what my career is going to be. And to us, we wanted a career in anything that we did. But when I talk to juveniles, and they're not looking for a career, they're sort of looking for a place until the world settles down a little bit, and then I'll make a commitment towards something, some career. So that phenomenon, I think but I think it helps because we at Commissioners Court keep saying that there's a huge impact because of the pandemic, and everybody seems to feel, yes, maybe not, it's so subtle, but something like that. Most people don't understand that you're paying that kind of money for someone coming out of high school, and for someone not to jump at that. There's got to be some psychological barriers that are taking place in our community and our society in general. So it's a huge challenge.
It takes a special person to be a corrections officer or a detention officer. I mean, you don't have the freedom and the flexibility to take a lunch hour and go catch a breath of fresh air. You're in a facility, and sometimes depending on the type of people you have in custody,
It's challenging.
you're gonna get hit. You're gonna be assaulted. You're gonna have to help clean feces. I mean, there's just a lot of, not a lot of people are cut out for that job. It's not an easy job. It's a very honorable job. And I really recognize and appreciate the work that our staff do. And I'm hopeful that, we continue our recruitment efforts, and that we find the right people, and that we're able to retain them. And I think finding strategies for retainment of personnel is also important.
Thank you for everything you guys do. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that concludes the presentation. There's just one thing. I did ask Jose Deborah, based on he's our data analyst, does a great job on this stuff, and he put this together for us. But I asked him, based on the trends he's seen in the last couple months this year, what we would be looking at by the end of the year if it continues. And he said, as you see on the slide, there's about 100% increase in 17-year-old bookings in the jail that we will see if the trend continues. So to the chief's point, that there's an increase there too, as well as the 16-year-olds. So we'll keep an eye on it. We'll keep you posted.
If ever the timing is not right for that, it's now.
Yeah.
Because look at all the variables.
Would that put us back to the 2019 numbers?
Yes, there would, it would surpass that,
Surpass it.
right? Yeah, you're looking at like maybe 2017 numbers. Yeah. And again, depending on the felonies, there could be, I mean, that could have an even more significant impact. Yeah. And I want to thank the chiefs again, that they also came and presented to the Justice Leadership Coordinating Council on Tuesday, keeping our justice leaders in tune with what's going on as well. So I want to really thank them for being good partners.
Thank you. Great job. Work. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Catherine, everyone here, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Not to alarm everybody, but we're doing some research on all this stuff, and we, because of what the plan that I want to bring to the county, that our team wants to bring to the county, is we're starting with analyzing the more serious offenses from juveniles, and that's, or rather the younger population. And so we got some numbers from the CDC that up to 2020, before the pandemic started, right? So in firearm deaths, 2020, involved firearm. 2020, it was 78% of all homicides involved firearm deaths. 53% of them were suicides. I have a feeling that this trend prior pandemic is not back to what it was in 2019 and 2020. And the reasons that the CDC has found for these issues is, number one, the changes or disruption to services and education was the number one factor for those homicides and suicides. Number two was mental stress. Number three, social isolation. And number four, economic stressors, job loss, and housing instability. So that just tells us that this is now back to the forefront after the pandemic. And of the breakdown of these homicides, 86% involved men. And the firearm homicides rate are the highest among teens and young adults, so between 15 and 34. Okay. And the highest of these are amongst Black and the Latino community. We're going to start getting the more current research and obviously looking at the other offenses, the ones that are, down the road. But I surmise that we're going to be looking at these same reasons and same stressors in what we're seeing right now with the increase in teens having that. And so, everything that y'all are telling us that's happening now was already happening back pre-pandemic. It's just not going to increase now. I surmise that once we take a look at the other factors, that we start looking at the felonies, not just the homicides, but other felonies, et cetera, misdemeanors, that we're going to see the same thing.
I was hearing a psychiatrist this morning saying that there's so much uncertainty that one of the bases of mental health issues is uncertainty, but that it doesn't end because we keep hearing more and more tragedies and more mass shootings and more. So we're increasing one of the biggest factors of mental health. We're adding to it every single day. Just look at this week and what happened in the schools. And so, schools feel unsafe now and, all these other factors. I think we're into a really difficult challenge. And I'm still not seeing the community or anybody really trying to come together and say, okay, we've got a crisis here. And one, I've said over and over, there's two prongs to it. One is the micro, which is the therapy and all the direct. But the other one is creating a culture of well-being. For example, PSAs and superintendents doing the announcements in the morning with mental health messages, spending 15 minutes so they can spend, an hour on health, on physical health, but they will give us, 5 minutes on the emotional health. And so I still think El Paso could be leading this direction of going to the community with a lot of information about dealing with this crisis. Because we're not going to solve it by more therapists or, more group therapy or whatever we're doing. That's great. But I think it's got to be a macro kind of approach in our community. And hopefully I can, in any way that I can help.
Judge, if I may really quickly.
Sure.
Myself and Kyle Williamson from the TAG have been coordinating for the last 2 months. And we are having a youthful offender summit next Wednesday morning from 9 to 12, where we're gathering with our CJC partners, myself, our juvenile probation department, and all of our local and state law enforcement and federal law enforcement, well, actually not federal, state, local and state law enforcement partners. And we're coming together to define the problem. And let's look at the data very closely. It's a 3-hour meeting. We're definitely not going to have enough time, but our goal is, prior to wrapping up that day, is to break out into 2 strategic planning work groups. One is suppression. Obviously, our law enforcement partners focus on the suppression. We're looking at violent offenders and talking about strategies, right? Suppression strategies that would be appropriate for our community, in particular to get these weapons off the streets. There's alarm at the number of ghost guns that are being confiscated in our streets, which is very concerning. And the other work group is looking, it's going to be a community focused group at identifying which partners do we need to bring to the table from the community, because we truly feel that this initiative, like you mentioned, the PSAs and educating parents and educating youth on the consequences, offering hope and offering other alternatives of pro-social activities is critical. Coming together and identifying who are those groups and beginning this conversation. Because we don't, us as a justice system, CJC, our probation department, that's not our place, right? It's not our place to lead the conversation. We feel that it really needs to come from the community. Finding those community leaders, those community nonprofit agencies to wrap themselves around the concept of prevention, violence prevention strategies. Is going to be effective. So we're starting the dialogue. We're starting the planning. I believe Commissioner Leon, I'm not too sure if it's on your calendar to attend, but you're all welcome to attend. If interested, I can forward to you the invitation. So you can hear the data and not just hear it from the probation end or the courts end, but also hear it from law enforcement. And we're going to be talking about some of the challenges and the struggles that law enforcement may also, or barriers that they may be confronted with when interfacing with the different systems as well.
Okay, thank you. You don't mind if you could tell Erica the time, and I would love to.
Yes, I will forward the email. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Before we move on, I'd just like to acknowledge our ASL interpreters for today. We have Dario Garcia and Montserrat Lizano.
That's nice.
They are there.
I
They
was
just.
missing them. Hi.
Closet.
Thank you.
Item number 5, budget hearing. Receive a presentation and provide feedback on the El Paso County Health and Dental Plan Design and Goals for Plan Year 2024.
Judge, Commissioners, this is part, we used to do budget hearings all crammed into August. And over the last several years, we've been trying to spread them out throughout the year as we get information and estimates. So we actually have normally we've already given a budget presentation earlier this year where our budget team gave some projections of where we're at. And now this month we have our medical dental plan design discussion and some updates for the court on this aspect of a major factor in our budget. And with that, I'd like to introduce and turn it over to Sam Trujillo, our Senior Deputy HR Officer.
Thank you, Betsy. So, Judge, Commissioners, on behalf of our HR staff, I'd first like to thank the court for giving us this opportunity to provide, like Betsy, this is an early budget forecast for the county's medical plan, along with our design and program proposals for plan year 2024. So plan year is a little bit different than the fiscal year. Our plan year starts on January 1 of 2024. And I know we're early in the plan year for just 2023 right now, but we are continuously reviewing our medical plan experiences that we see each month. We review our revenue, we review the programs that were implemented to see how they're working, new policies, and of course our contracts. Each one of those items can affect our forecast for this next year. So I want to keep that in mind because we are a little bit early here, but we think we have a good idea of where we're headed over this next year. So unfortunately, medical costs continue to rise. Medical inflation right now is expected to be about 10% throughout this year, and we expect that the cost will continue to increase in plan year 2024. However, I'm happy to report that even though we're early in this plan year right now, we have seen some significant indications that many of the difficult decisions that the court made this last year and years before that have had a direct impact to what we're going to be presenting today, and they're starting to pay off. So I would like to point out that there's been a lot of work that has been done by your risk pool board. They meet often, especially during this time as we're trying to do the projections. Of course, the Human Resources Department, we have a great team. Some of them are here right now, some are listening online. Our county administration, county attorney's office, our budget department, and our auditor's department all play a role in this plan, and we couldn't do what we need to do without the help of those other teams. So we do expect a positive trend to continue throughout the year from what we've seen so far. Our latest report shows that our risk pool reserve fund is now over $8 million. If you remember, last year we came to the court several times because we were very concerned about the level of our risk fund, and we had some contingency plans in place to deal with that. And the court really stepped forward last year to help us make it through those difficult times. So this $8 million is a significant change to where we were just a short time ago. So based on our initial analysis and our early projections, we have developed several goals for plan year 2024. What we want to do, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail with these, but I'd like to give a little bit of a highlight, is that we want to pay back the general fund for $3 million in infusions the court made to the risk fund during the pandemic. So we want to start paying that back now. We want to keep the 2024 premiums at 2% or less. That's our goal. We want to reduce the premiums for employees enrolled in the narrow networks and the ACO medical plans. We did a lengthy presentation with the court last year on both those plans, and they've been implemented. Both have been significant cost savers for both the plan and for employees. We would like to reduce the premiums on the family plans. This is something the court has mentioned to us over the years about what we could do to keep those or reduce those costs on the family plans and the dependent plans. It was difficult over the last couple of years because of the level of our risk fund, but we have made significant advancements in that, and we're wanting to do that for a goal for 2024.
And would that be only in the narrow networks or across all plans?
Across all plans. And then finally, we'd like to double the county's contribution on the employees' HSA, the health savings account. Right now, the county contributes $600 a year. We want to bump that up to $1,200 a year. And that's something that we had also been presenting to the courts, but over the last couple of years, it's been difficult again with the levels that we're at. But we think that is a significant program that really increases the people that are in the high deductible plan. And that's where we see employees making smart choices on their medical decisions.
Really quick, it used to be 1,200. We had lowered it to 600 a few years back. So.
Right. So today we'd like to provide the court with an overview of the risk pool board operations from one of our benefits staff. We'd like to provide the court with an analysis on the risk fund itself from our budget department. We would like to provide an overview of our medical expenses that we have seen over this last year from our health consultant. And then finally, we'd like to provide the court with our budget goals, our plan design, our premiums, and the programs that we would like to implement for 2024. Again, these are all our goals. We have to pay close attention as we go through the year to see what's happening with the cost and any changes. Right now, I would like to introduce Joanna Faldoa. She is one of the main people behind the scenes that's handling this medical plan. She doesn't get the opportunity to come up and talk to you face to face, but I'm telling you, she's a workhorse for our organization. I'd like to call her up to do the first part of our presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
Welcome, Joanna.
Hello, thank you, Ben. Good morning, Judge and Commissioners. Joanna Faldoa with the Human Resources Department. For the next few slides, we have prepared a brief overview of the purpose of the county's risk pool board. The members of the risk pool board are volunteers recommended by each commissioner and approved by the Commissioners Court. Members of the board are fiduciaries of the county's self-funded medical plan and the risk pool fund, which provide employees, elected officials, retirees, and their families with health benefits. The purpose of the board, aside from being fiduciaries of the fund, is to provide equality of benefits, to attract and retain employees, provide uniformity as described in the local government code, and hear appeals from plan members. Some of the board's roles and responsibilities are displayed on this slide, and including approval general policies such as the summary plan descriptions and strategic wellness plans, reviewing budgets, and monitoring and working with third-party administrators. The risk pool board meets regularly to review and take action on financial and medical reports and review ongoing programs or potential new programs. The board also reviews reports, claims, costs, and projections from our TPA representative and our health consultant. Between board meetings, our HR benefits team with the health consultants hub and the EDNA team to review medical and pharmacy claim trends, current and future programs, trainings for the board, and any potential employee issues. Next, I will hand over the presentation to our Assistant Budget Director, Ms. Jessica Garza, who will give a quick overview of the risk pool budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jessica.
Good morning, Judge and Commissioners. Jessica Garza, Interim Director of Budget and Fiscal Policy. So I want to, again, thank you for this opportunity to present to you today as we start the process to prepare our FY24 budget. I'm going to cover some basic items, an overview of our current budget, FY23. Also, we'll be sharing our anticipated budget impacts for FY24 in regards to our health benefit. Some of the key dates for FY24 for our budget hearings and our budget adoption. So here you see what our all funds budget looks like. For FY23, we budgeted $554.5 million. You can see that the general fund coming in at $443 million is our largest portion of our annual budget. There are 6 main funds within our total budget: general fund, special revenue, debt service, enterprise, capital projects, and grants. So as we go through the slides, please keep in mind that we're really going to focus on our general fund, which is where our main impacts are going to be felt.
Just, where does it show on grants as 0%?
At the time we budget, Commissioner, we don't budget grants. As you see your BAs weekly, you see the new grants being added in. And so then our budget increases as the grants are awarded and as they're actually starting to implement. So for budget purposes, we don't budget any grants until the auditor.
The auditor won't recognize the revenue until it's reviewed. So at the beginning of the year, we say 0, but you'll see like where this number says 554. By the end of the year, your number is right under 700 or right around 700 million. Adds on to, I don't know if he wants to add to that, but they grow throughout the year as they're received and your budget grows.
I think right now our total budget, with grants is about $660.
Ed, did you want to comment?
Did you wanna jump
I
in
see you
yet?
come on the screen, so just.
That is correct, Judge. When we do certify the funds from the agencies, we add them to the budget during the year. And they're accounted for as life-to-date funds. Because some of the grants span various fiscal years, multiple years, and they happen in the middle of our fiscal year. So their fiscal year for the grant are different from the county. So we do them as we certify them, and yes, they have life-to-date budgets. So we can just keep carrying them over year after year. And we don't include them in the overall budget because it kind of skews the picture of what we're trying to focus on during budget time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this is an overview of our general fund budget by program. Again, it's a little bit over, well, it's probably close to $444 million. You can see from this pie chart that the largest portion of our general fund budget is in general government. That is where our internal services are housed, including the Commissioner's Court, County Administration, Budget, HR, another internal services department. Public safety is our second largest program within our general fund budget. And this is kind of a new thing. In years past, public safety had always been the largest, but because we've augmented and invested in our internal service departments, general government jumped a little bit.
And general government includes our reserves.
It does include the reserves.
That's a big chunk of that is our
reserves. Thank you, Betsy. As we began working on our auditor, with our auditor, not on our auditor, we work on him, give us more money. But as we work with our auditor on revenue projections. It's going to jump on right now. As we begin working with the auditor on revenue projections for FY24, we will keep you updated on any material changes in the revenue estimates. As a reminder, while we cannot budget for more revenue than what the auditor certifies, we will be providing estimates based on historical variances, utilizing fund balance to present a statutorily balanced budget for FY24. We've received updated revenue projections from the auditor's office on March 15th, and we received pre-preliminary values from Central Appraisal on March 17th. And from those two sources and looking at the historical variances, we estimate that our general fund budget could increase up to $20 million more dollars. And that's based on Central Appraisal District's current estimates. That number does continue to fluctuate throughout the budget process. We'll receive our official preliminaries in May and then our certified values in July. And so we do see, again, we do see historical variances between now and July when that certification comes in. But we will continue to work with our county administrator or chief administrator to ensure that we capture all of the increases that we're looking at within our budget to make sure that we we want to provide adequate resources for all of our programs that we currently have in place. This slide gives you a quick overview of the risk pool health impacts. But this is using FY23 numbers. $286 million was allocated for salary and fringe benefits. 65 cents of every dollar that's budgeted goes to salary and benefits. 10 cents out of every dollar that's budgeted specifically for salary and fringe. Sorry, 10 cents is for health insurance.
10 of the 65 or 10 on top of the 65?
10 of the 65.
10 of the
10 for health insurance. Health insurance remains our second highest fringe benefit cost. At the time this was prepared, we were at 29.5 million. Those were our budgeted numbers. With all the new positions coming in, it is slightly above 30 million. And we're still processing, we're still putting in place some of the new positions that were approved as part of this budget. Other items accounted for within the fund include life insurance, which doesn't fall under the risk pool board. our third-party administrative contract costs, stop loss insurance premiums for claims over 300,000. The last bullet on here shows 2 million that was infused into the risk pool fund for 2 million and 1 million in 22. Sam spoke to this a little bit earlier, and this is we're looking at the process now to reimburse the general fund for the infusions into the risk pool.
Really quick, just before you jump off of there, those numbers are not unusual. So we also watch the Bureau of Labor Statistics nationally, like what's the average going rate for benefits across the board. And at the 10 cents of every dollar for the risk pool fund going into for the health insurance aspect of the benefits, that is not unusual. As a matter of fact, I think we're a little bit under the national average on the cost of health coverage.
The reimbursement to the general fund in the last bullet, I thought we had already done some stuff.
So we have done some and through ARPA, and I think there's still a little bit remaining. So we continue to work with HR and with the auditor to see when funds are available to make sure that it gets fully reimbursed.
How much do we know how much we've reimbursed?
Sam can probably speak to that.
It was like 800,000 or 900,000.
Yeah, it's less than $1 million.
It's like 800,000 or 900,000 have been reimbursed.
Of the total.
So we actually budgeted in ARPA $3 million, and we're about 1.8 that has been reimbursed already into the account. The other thing that we did, you saw in some of the highlights, is we during the time we were low in our fund, we advanced the 2023 payments to cover the HSA expenses at the beginning of the year, and then caught up during the year.
Thank you.
Okay, so looking ahead to FY24 for preliminary impacts, Joanna mentioned we're looking at a 2% increase. That 2% increase, if we use the FY23 number that was budgeted, would be about 590,000. With the new positions, it's coming in at about 610. And we continue to work with Human Resources, our third-party consultant, and the Risk Pool Board to track any other increases and opportunities for decreases for the impacts to our health fund. So by now, I'm sure you're aware we've already kicked off our budget. We did that on March 8th. The deadline for our departments to submit their budgets is April 22nd. Tomorrow is actually the deadline for departments to submit requests for new personnel. And so we'll continue to work with HR on what those impacts will be. And as we get closer to presenting the full budget in the June and July timeframe, we'll probably have a better idea of what our new positions and our full impact will be to our budget at that time. We'll be looking at June for HR and operating expense for department requests, appeals with our chief administrator. Then August 15th and 16th is when we're scheduled to have our annual budget hearings, with the budget being adopted on September 18th. One thing I want to add to this slide is that we did not have a full schedule for CIP. We've been working with strategic development. We think we now have a timeline for FY24. And what we're going to ask during the budget process is that we have the allocation of the funds authorized and then present the projects to you at a later time to make sure that we're able to fully review and give each of the requests the time that they deserve before we come with a final recommendation for that. So those dates will kind of come in between some of the dates that you see on this calendar. And at this time, I will turn this over to Mr. McGraw.
Thank you, Jessica. Welcome, Mr. McGraw.
Good morning. I'm Randy McGraw with Hub International. It's a pleasure to be here, especially with better news than our last few budget sessions that we've had. And before I get started, too, I just want to thank the court over the 2 years where we had some pretty stormy weather in terms of claims for the subsidies in the investment in the employee benefit program. It very much helped your employees. And things are looking better now. So we've got good news, as you've heard previously, where we've started to repay. We've already repaid some advances that the auditors helped us through back in 2022. And it's our intent to repay the general fund during this 2023 year as well. So on the next slide, oh, and one other thing too is all of your appointees to the risk pool board do a fantastic job without exception. So now we had one just resign, but they've been doing a phenomenal job, and you're to be commended for picking them, and they've done great work for the risk pool board.
Nice to hear.
So
thank you.
Every one of them has made great contributions to the discussion, asked great questions. On our next slide, we just have a recap of the performance for the plan year 2022. So plan year equals calendar year for the benefit plan. And you can see in this table here, going across left to right, we've got revenues, expenses, our HSA contributions, and the net results by the different plan designs that we have. So the county actually offers 6 different benefit choices within two choices of a plan between the core plan and the consumer-driven health plan, which is CDHP. So each of our 3 network tiers offers the same version of benefits under the core plan and the consumer-driven health plan. So what we see on this chart here is all of the plans together, the performance of the consumer-driven versus the core plan as it's total there. And you can see that both plans operated positively during 2022 revenues versus expenses. You can also see in the revenue column, we accounted for $1.5 million advance that was made. And just prior to that, in the month of December, so it fell in 2021, there was another $1 million advance. And so you can see that a repayment was made last year where the fund generated enough money to pay back the county, which is they just basically took part of the budget and advanced it earlier in the year so that we didn't have to ask for more infusions from the general fund. So the overall performance was good across all categories. If we go to our next slide. So what we have here is just a graph of the moving average revenues versus expenses. And so on the left-hand side, it's a 12-month rolling moving average, and on the right-hand side is a 6-month rolling moving average. So of course, 12 months is a little bit smoother ride on the chart, not as many jagged ups or downs. And you can see from about late 2018 all the way till 2022, about February or March, the plan was basically running at a deficit. Expenses were higher than revenues over that time period. But then things began to turn around in the first quarter, after the first quarter of 2022. And then there were also, you can see the impact of the increases in contributions that were made. So there were some pretty substantial increases to the county's contribution to the plan for both 2021 and 2022. That helped the revenue line rise. Now you can see that the positive results and hence the ability to repay the loans there on that 12-month moving average. On the right-hand side, this gives you, I guess, a better perspective of things that are happening more recently. So it only looks back 6 months. And so you can see too, right after the first quarter of 2022, basically we went through 2 years. It seemed like every time we turned around, there was another catastrophic claim happening inside of the health plan. Catastrophic just meaning high dollar health claim, over $500,000 or sometimes $1 million for a claim as well. But you can see that the overall risk of the population has dramatically improved since that started second quarter of 2022, and it has come down. It's a little bit of an uptick here, which is not unusual sometimes in the early part of the year. This is based on data through January. of 2023. I'm sorry, yeah, January. On our next slide, this slide is moving average cost per member per month, and it compares the core plan versus the traditional PP or the consumer-driven health plan. The core plan is the plan that has co-pays for doctor office visits and prescription drugs. The consumer-driven health plan is a high deductible health plan where you have a $3,500 deductible and there are no co-pays for office visits. The employees bear the cost up till they satisfy their deductible, and then benefits are paid at 100% for the rest of the year. So what you can see here too, though, is historically, and it looks the same most of the time for every employer group, that the traditional type plans, the core plans, have a higher cost of care because people are able to see a doctor for a small copay, et cetera. And then once they've met their deductible, the plan pays 80% of the benefits, et cetera. But you can see too in that gap, so this is per covered person, not just per covered employee, $200 a month less cost on average for people in the consumer-driven health plan compared to the core plan. And then we also have a slide coming up too, so you can kind of see the performance of our different tiers. And that's the next page. So just a couple of comments on this too before we get really excited, is that the split between enrollment in the core plan and the consumer-driven health plan is about 55-45. So 55% of your population participate in the core plan, and then about 45% participate in the consumer-driven health plan. And so what we've done here is we've split out the average cost per member per month based on the three different networks and plan designs, or the three different networks that you offer. So these are the 6 different categories that I mentioned. So it's clear to see too now in terms of the number of people that are in the narrow networks as we refer to them. So there's 2 narrow networks, ACO in the middle of the page, and UMC also offers a narrow network option for employees as well. The majority of employees are enrolled in the traditional network. So in the ACO network, there's about 500 to 600 people in there. And in the UMC network, there's about 100. So there's not that many people in those two. So I want to point that out because statistically, as you have those lower number of sample sizes, it's not credible that we would say in terms of comparing these, because with 100 people, you could have 100 people go a whole year without having many claims, and then maybe you have all of a sudden one person has an unfortunate event and the claims cost might be $500,000, and that would really distort these numbers. So, but even though they're not credible, you can see that the narrow networks are doing as expected and outperforming the traditional plans in terms of the cost of the plan. And that's primarily driven by hospital costs. Hospital costs are the bigger part of all of your claims expense. And so that's where the bigger bang for the buck comes from the narrow networks, because it's narrowing your choice of hospitals down to under ACO in network is the hospitals of Providence or Tenet. And of course, UMC is just the UMC campus and network would be in network under, under the UMC network. So the reason to point this out is this observation is what has led into the recommendations in terms of how we charge for payroll deductions under the narrow networks versus the traditional plan. And then also plays into the strategy for what I would refer to as a shift in your contribution. So as you heard, the overall increase in funding to the plan is 2%. That's the recommendation. But the other thing that we're doing this year and proposing, in addition to doubling the health saving account contribution to promote or to make it easier for people to select the consumer-driven health plan, but have some money to help pay for their deductibles and co-pays. So think back to that prior slide. For each covered person out there, It's about $2,400 a year less claims expense. So increasing your HSA contribution to that population is only 600 of that. That plan will still perform well financially, revenues versus expenses. But the 2% increase in funding does not really translate to the $590,000 budget impact number that you saw. And the reason for that is recognizing that payroll deductions for dependent coverage, regardless of which plan that you're in for family, child, or spouse, that those amounts have been pretty high compared to the market. So the proposition this year is to subsidize that and call it shifting the cost. So we're going to lower the payroll deductions for dependent care under the narrow network plans because we want to promote those for people that they're contributing to the surplus that you have to bring in. So the bulk of the $590,000 impact on your budget comes from basically the county's increasing its subsidy towards the dependent coverage. And you'll see that coming up in a later slide when we get to the payroll deductions. So with that,
That's it.
unless you have any questions for me.
Actually, I have a question for
Sure.
Betsy. So it seems like we have to do a better job of explaining the narrow networks and the benefits of the narrow networks to our employees. Because it sounds like only about a quarter are enrolled with the narrow networks, and there's clearly savings.
So there's a couple things about that. Every time we add a new plan, it takes a few years to get people. It's not just us telling them. They have to like kind of see like, oh, you're on that plan. How like to see how others are like, I love being on the narrow network, or, you know, realize that it works for them, or even to hear the information and then throughout the year see like, well, do I ever need to go to another network, and get more comfortable with it themselves. But we definitely have to continue to talk about it. HR, one of the things that they've started doing, and we've asked that they try to have smaller meetings, like go out to the Fabens warehouse, go out to the parks maintenance shop, and have smaller conversations with smaller groups where they can have more understanding, more time to think about it and digest it. But like even when we started with consumer driven, the first year I think we had like 25 people or something like that on it. It was really low, and now it's 45% of our employees are on it. So it just takes some time for people to get comfortable with what is this. Insurance is hard to understand. It's a complex, and so it takes people a while to adopt new ideas.
And you can't change mainstream, right? So that if you start your plan.
No, you don't.
So
You can't
you
change
get the
mid.
information, and you can't do something about it at that point.
Well, you get the information, and we try to do a good job right before open enrollment, leading up to open enrollment time, and then during open enrollment. We really infiltrate and try to saturate with information. And then you have time to make your change, and it goes into effect in January. But you will see also people start evaluating. The more they start looking also at those premium differences, that takes a little while to soak into. Like, what am I giving up? Wow, this is a lot less money. Things like that.
Yeah, that was actually a topic at our risk pool board meeting earlier this month. We spent quite a bit of time talking about things we could do to enhance the communication on the narrow networks.
And right now, this is we're in March. This is our projection right now. We'll continue to monitor this very closely over the next few months to see how the plan is performing. As Randy showed on that slide too, there's also, at the beginning of the year, people haven't met their deductibles, so they're paying more out of pocket. And then the plan starts paying more later in the year. And so we just need to continue to monitor. They project for that, but we just need to continue to monitor how it's looking, how things are going. And then we'll bring back the final updates as we move closer into budget. But overall, it's really promising.
Yes, the commission.
Just a couple of quick questions before we go into the dental portion of this. Something brought something to mind. If an employee passes away, within 6 months of their retirement, does the life insurance carry them, or does the life insurance stop when they retire?
When the day of retirement, so you have the ability to take it on your own, to convert it, or there's a portability option. But if you retire, you're no longer covered under our group plan.
So the $40,000 life insurance would, upon retirement, stops unless they carry it over.
Right.
Okay, and I had a question, maybe Sam can answer. You mentioned 2%. Is it a 2% drop in employees' premiums or increase?
An increase.
See, that's where maybe as we go through the program, we can talk about that. Since it's better times for the county, we can translate that into better times for our employees. And also, I was thinking about our part-time employees, that they also can now receive benefits, but it's expensive because they're part-time employees. Maybe we can assist them in a way. Like I said, I don't have it clear in my mind, but I think as we move forward for this coming year, that since we're doing a little bit better, that our employees do a little bit better.
We will definitely take all that into our recommendations as we work through and watch these numbers and bring that back in some of our final recommendations to the court for budget.
The 2% increase really only applies to the traditional plan and the employee-only level. In the narrow networks, everybody that has dependent coverage is going to see a significant reduction in their payroll.
Good.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Randy.
And Commissioner, even with that, that's still up to 2% is what we're projecting at this time. So that's our goal, is that any premium increases would be 2% or less. Maximum. And that actually feels pretty good from where we were before. If you remember last year, we were talking as high as 21% increases. So that's a big change in a year.
And that's why you'll hear me being a little bit hesitant on this, like let us keep watching, because I guess I'm a little gun shy or paranoid about, what's this going to look like 2 years from now if we're not keeping up with medical trend in our premiums.
We're only at the end of March right now. We have a lot of expenses that are going to be coming through over the next year, and we'll have a better idea as we go through the year. But right now, it looks really good, and so that's why we set these goals really high. Judge, this is next up is our final part of our presentation. I'd first like to thank Randy and your teams for the work they did to get us to this point. Jessica, you and the budget team. Thank you for the budget team, and then of course Joanna with you and your team with all the work behind the scenes. This is our final part. This is the main portion of the medical and dental plan. And what we'd like to show you on this part of the presentation is the impact of the decisions that the court made last year. We would like to highlight some of the major accomplishments that had occurred. We want to show you the new programs that we have developed or in the process of developing, at least give you a general information on that. We would also like to show you a comparison between our plan and our neighboring entities. And then finally, highlight the goals that we have for plan year 2024. As we go through this part of the presentation, I would also like to highlight the county's designation as a self-insured entity. This designation is very significant when we're developing our plan because being self-insured, we have the flexibility to do things within our plan that a lot of entities can't do. For instance, the special rates that we develop, like with the options with UMC or the ACO network or the narrow networks, and then of course the Mexico network that we developed a few years, which was implemented as an option for our employees that get services for them or their families in Mexico. So with that, next I'd like to call our benefits manager, which is Berenice Acosta, and ask her to go over our existing plan and the programs for 2024.
Thank you, Sam. Good morning, Judge, Commissioners. Berenice Acosta with the Human Resources Department. For the record, Philip is here. On this slide here is the variety of benefit options currently being provided by the county through the Human Resources Department benefit section. However, for this presentation today, we will be focusing on the medical and dental benefits. Under the medical plan, the county currently provides services to county employees and their dependents and retirees pre-65 and their dependents. We do have 3 network plan options as described earlier, which is for employees and retirees under 65. It's the traditional, the ACO, and the UMC network with 2 plan options, which is the core and the consumer-driven health plan. For the Medicare eligible retirees, these are those post-65. The county offers through Aetna a group Medicare Advantage plan, also known as the MAP. The total monthly MAP premium is currently at $224 per month, and the county, through the general fund, subsidizes 50% of that premium, which means retirees on the MAP only pay $112 per month. This is a private insurance through Aetna, therefore the claims and contributions are not paid by the risk fund. The claims and the risk is assumed under Aetna. For employees and non-Medicare retirees, they have the option of participating in one of 4 tiers, which is employee only, employee and children, employee and spouse, and employee and family. We do examine other tier options. However, the current tier system is the one that continues to work best for the county. Under this next slide, it represents a list of notable accomplishments we've had in the past year as a result of prior risk board and commissioners court decisions. The first one being the impacts of our risk fund, as described earlier by Sam. The risk fund is at a healthy level, and currently it's at a little over $8 million. We also had the opportunity to seek reimbursement from ARPA funds for eligible COVID medical claims. As Sam mentioned, the court did approve to allocate $3 million from ARPA funds to reimburse the risk pool fund. Through December of 2022, COVID claims have totaled approximately $4.6 million. Out of the $4.6 million, staff has identified over $1.6 million in eligible COVID medical claims and submitted requests for reimbursements from the allocated $3 million ARPA funds, leaving a balance of approximately $1.3 million for future claims. Next, we have the updates to the 2023 Strategic Health and Wellness Plan. We update the wellness plan annually in an effort to continue improving our employees' healthy lifestyle, which now includes a multi-step program and is part of the overall high-risk claimant program, which I'll be going over in more detail in the next few slides. Then we have our Prudent RX program. This is a pharmacy program that applies to all specialty medications and includes highly utilized classes such as the autoimmune, hepatitis C, multiple sclerosis, and oncology. In 2022, the Prudent RX net savings was in the amount of over $260,000. In addition, this program will now become available for the consumer-driven health plan. Currently, it's only applied to the core plan, and staff will be bringing an updated agreement for the court's approval in the near future. Then we have the premium discounts for wellness initiatives. The county currently offers up to 6% in medical premium discounts for employees who remain tobacco-free and participate in the annual health risk assessment and the health screenings, where they also receive $50 in a gift card. This has been a successful program, and we've had over 1,000 eligible employees participate this past year. For the next 3 items, which is the Employee Fitness Center, high-risk claimant programs, and the county HSA contribution, I'll be discussing in more detail in the next few slides. First is our Employee Fitness Center. The grand opening took place back in September of 2021. And since then, we have grown to over 328 active members and have averaged over 1,000 visitations per month. We are empowering our members to adopt healthier lifestyles by providing opportunities to engage in activities, including cardio machines, assisted weight machines, Olympic strength training equipment, and virtual training provided by Peloton. In addition, we have provided members who are enrolled in the county medical plan the opportunity to speak directly with a registered dietitian to prepare their nutrition plan and provide all members the opportunity to engage and learn more about exercise fitness through their wellness team. The county's Fitness and Wellness Center is not only a resource for members to adopt a healthier lifestyle, but also to obtain metrics that support their results with our blood pressure kiosk and body composition analyzer, which provides a comprehensive report on their body composition, including metabolic health, body fat, and muscle mass. Under our high-risk claimant programs, just a quick overview. If the court remembers in 2021, and as discussed earlier, we've had several high-risk claims that had a significant financial impact to our risk pool reserve. Even though the county does have stop-loss insurance in the amount of $300,000, it's still a negative impact on our weekly claim averages. Under the slide, we are showing an overview of the current high-risk claimant programs that we have developed and implemented. The latest program we have, which is the multi-step program, it's known as the PLANT, which is an acronym for Plan, a Lifestyle and Nutrition Transformation Program. This multi-step program is designed to provide eligible members access to personal nutrition coaching and fitness coaching to improve their quality of life and mitigate chronic conditions that directly impact the county's medical plan. Also, the 2022 Aetna mid-year report, it indicates there has been a 3.3% reduction in the high-cost claimants. And lastly, under our accomplishments, we have the county HSA contribution. And before you is an overview of the HSA incentive throughout the years. And as discussed earlier, in 2016, 2017, we implemented a $600 HSA incentive. And in 2018 through 2020, we had it at $1,200. And then, of course, due to the decrease in risk funding, we for 2021 through 2023, we decreased it back to $600. And the goal this year is to increase it back to the $1,200. Okay. So on this next slide, we have the comparison between the county's employee premium cost as it compares to the local entities here. The court did approve an 8% employee premium increase last year for 2023. And before you is the county monthly premiums as it compares to the local groups. Even with the increase from this plan year, the county is still comparable and competitive in several tiers. For example, under the county's core plan, which is in the darker blue column, it would be equivalent to the cities, which is one right next to it in the green columns, where the county charges $87 per month under the employee only, and the city charges $340 per month. On the high deductible, the county charges $13 per month, and the city charges $76 per month. On the other end, under employee and family, the county currently charges $1,076 per month, whereas the city charges $1,490 per month. And under the consumer-driven health plan, employee and family, the county charges $714 per month, and the city charges $648 per month. The county also provides lower cost options that are not displayed on this slide, but it will be displayed on a later slide, and it includes the UMC narrower network rates, the ACO narrow network rates, which reduces the overall cost for the employee and for the plan. Okay. So under this next slide are the recommendation continuations for plan year 2024. That includes keeping the 3 network plans, the traditional ACO and the UMC narrow network, with the 2 plan options of the core plan and the consumer-driven health plan. Continue with the current tier system. Continue with the premium discounts, the 4% for completing the HRA and the health screening, and the 2% discount for being tobacco-free for completing the tobacco cessation program. The wellness budget of $100,000 and the wellness coordinator position. Under this slide here is the list of the different goals that we have been discussing with the court throughout the presentation. The first one is, as Sam mentioned, to keep the increase to the county contribution and employee premium contribution at 2% or less. And as described before, we're looking at it being close to $600,000 in an annual impact. The second one is to initiate the reimbursements to the general fund for the past infusions, the $3 million that budget discussed. Of course, this would be done in a quarterly basis, and it would be dependent on the risk fund ballot. The next one is to decrease premiums for the ACO and UMC network plans. Of course, this would be as an incentive for employees who elect these plans, which is a cost savings, again, not only to the employee, but also to the county. If we reduce those rates, we're looking at a decrease of employee premium contribution of over $400,000. The next one is no premium change in dental plans. Then we have the increase to the county HSA contribution, as we mentioned, from $600 to $1,200. That's a budget impact of $1.3 million. Again, this is an amount that we, at the beginning of the year in January, that's the amount that is reduced from the risk fund. It's not in increments. It's a one-time cost of $1.3 million. And the last one is to decrease the dependent tiers, including the family tier. So if we decrease those employee premium contributions, we're looking at an annual budget impact of $500,000. So with the goals that we described, this slide here is showing the breakdown of what those impacts would be based on those goal changes. So based on our goals this year that we described, and like I said in the previous slide, we're expecting a net budget impact increase of a little over $1 million. This again would be for the fiscal year. And this would be on top of the existing budget. And again, these are our goals. This may change depending on the levels of the risk fund. On these next 3 slides, sorry, I think it went. It's showing what the current premium is as it compares to the proposed premium rate. So if you notice under employee and dependents, spouse, children, and family, the orange being the current premium rate and the blue being the proposed 2024 rate, you'll see a decrease in those tiers. And again, these are the monthly premium rates. So right here, we're showing the traditional CDHP and the core. Here is the ACO, core, ACO, CDHP. And again, if you notice under the employee independence, you'll see a decrease in the premium cost.
A significant decrease.
And then lastly, we have our UMC network plans, the core and the CDHP. And the same applies for the dependent tiers. Okay. With that, this concludes our presentation. And of course, we're available if there's any questions from the court.
This is excellent. I mean, I've been in HR, I can tell you. And the other thing is doing it this early, because sometimes you wait too long and, you're not understanding. That means that you already know where we're at, know where we want to be at a very early part of the budget process. And really, this is a really excellent presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Commissioner.
Betsy and Sam, maybe we can look at a retiree that retires at a certain time, that our life insurance will carry them, maybe for an additional 6 months? Do other counties do that? And if so, what would our impact be?
There is I've started meeting with some of you individually, but in my next one-on-one meeting with you, I do have some conversations about retiree insurance, more on the healthcare side, something I've learned recently. Some things I've become more aware of recently, really with Wally's passing. And that I also would like for you to consider, but I'll talk to you guys about that in the one-on-one and we can bring it back for further consideration for the court. And I'll make sure to include that consideration.
Minnie, thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great team.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
And this concludes all the items on today's agenda, Judge.
No. Let's get some one more. No, thank you, all of you. Thank you. This wasn't bad. This morning feels a little different. You have mentioned how impersonal it feels like for them to have been in the bigger commission.
We do like this room for these work sessions. It's just it's more challenging for our AV team and for our broadcasting, but it does give a more work session feel.
Just so good. I think more for them as well, that they feel like they're having a discussion versus a presentation.
Right.
Okay.
And sometimes we take out the podium and actually put a table there if they have a long room to let them sit there and just kind of have a conversation, discussion.
Maybe when we have certain, topics that would be more applicable to this.
Yes, sir.
Would be nice.
I know we're getting done early. We were anticipating we may go through lunch. So we have lunch available as well.
Even better.
Yes.
Well, thank you all. Commissioner Scott. We'll see you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great
Thank you.
week. Thank you.
And this concludes today's meeting at 11:24 a.m.